Hey there, I'm your host, the Bread Pirate. Ever since Breath of the Wild came out in 2017 for the Wii U and Switch, it's had me, as well as a lot of other people in the community, scratching our heads. It changed a lot about the series and created the question of what is a Zelda game? Is it a medieval fantasy game, or is it an action game? Is it about exploration, and does the story even matter? The franchise has certainly come a long way since its roots on the NES, but what really has changed? Today, we're going to be diving into this question by comparing the original Legend of Zelda to Breath of the Wild. This, however, is only part one, so sit back and relax as we talk about overworlds and dungeons. If the Zelda series has been known for anything, it's the sprawling overworlds it has. And despite being made for the Nintendo Entertainment System back in 1986, the original Legend of Zelda is no exception. In Zelda 1, the overworld was divided into 128 different screens on an 8x16 grid. Going from one corner of the map to the other took about 2.5 minutes, which might not sound like a lot, but in reality it would take a lot longer to cover that distance until you got to the end of the game, since you would constantly have to deal with enemies, mazes, and distractions which could potentially lead to secrets. And as many players already know, Breath of the Wild is the exact same. Instead of a grid like older games though, Breath of the Wild is divided up into 15 regions, in total taking about 45 to 50 minutes to walk from one corner to the other. The small quote-unquote problem with both games and walking that distance though, is that you're always bound to be distracted and thrown off course, whether that's due to enemies, mazes, secrets, or any other number of things that you can do in the overworld. In other words, both overworlds have a lot of interactivity. In Zelda 1, it was blowing up walls, burning trees, investigating statues, and checking out caves. And in Breath of the Wild, it's blowing up enemies, hunting wildlife, investigating Korok puzzles, and finding shrines, which is honestly only scratching the surface. Additionally, both games boast a wide array of environments, such as deserts, mountains, coastlines, and deep forests. Each is filled to the brim with NPCs to discover, and enemies, which correspond to specific biomes, such as levers, which are only found in sandy areas, and Lynels, which are only found in the mountains. However, in Breath of the Wild, these biome-specific enemies are usually reskins of enemies that you find in other places in the overworld. Yeah, but that's a topic for the next episode when we're going to be talking about enemies and items. No spoilers! Now, we've talked a lot about the similarities between the two overworlds, but there also are a lot of differences. For instance, in Zelda 1, the entire world isn't really accessible from the very start of the game. A lot of people like to say that the game gave unrestricted exploration, but that's just not the case. A number of locations require the raft in order to be accessed, and almost all of northwestern Hyrule is off limits to the player until they learn how to either escape the Lost Woods or get the ladder. And that's not even taking into account the sheer amount of enemies you'll have to face along the way, which are likely to kill you multiple times. So yes, you can go to most areas of the game from the very start, but unless you've already played the game or have a game guide, you're not going to know how to explore those areas, or how to get to them. Contrary-wise, Breath of the Wild is a game where you have the entire map open to you once you finish with the Great Plateau, and I mean the whole world. In the select few areas of the map where extreme temperatures can prevent you from progressing, you usually find the item you need in a nearby town or stable, making the hurdle of extreme temperatures non-existent unless you decided to enter the region from a weird angle or you missed the item that you needed. The only location that we can sort of say is off limits to the starting player is Hyrule Castle, but that's technically a dungeon. Yes, dungeons. We're not there yet. We'll get there in a minute. So, in essence, Zelda 1 had a much more restricted overworld than Breath of the Wild. There are a couple other small things which we could say differ between the two, but all of those things pale in comparison to the largest difference between the two overworlds: importance. See, in Breath of the Wild, the overworld is the main focus of the game. Everything either revolves around it or is a part of it. It takes a spotlight. But in Zelda 1, this wasn't really the case. Instead, there was another huge part of the world which was just as, if not more, prominent. And I think many of you know exactly what I'm talking about.